Alright, it's time for another Flip Classroom activity. You guys have been given Flip Classroom notes, and your directions are to complete the guided notes as you watch this video. Now, we get to do the fun stuff. We spent some time practicing our public speaking, and now we get to do some arguing and debating. So a debate is a discussion about a controversial and public question in an assembly involving opposing viewpoints. So people are going to disagree, and they're going to argue in a structured and formal way. A debate is an extension of public speaking, and each side is given the opportunity to defend their beliefs using evidence, rebuttals, and good public speaking strategies. I want to show you a video quickly to illustrate some of the strategies and procedures of a debate.
Unfortunately, the captain of the university debate team had a scheduling conflict. Yeah, so we had to bring someone else in to fill in for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the co-host of CNN's Crossfire, famed political consultant, the Raging Cajun, Mr. James Carville.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Pritchett. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, sir.
Topic number one. What is your position on the role of government in supporting innovation in the field of biotechnology?
Well, Dean, I'm glad that you asked that question.
Actually, I'd like to jump in and take that one, Jimmy, if you don't mind.
Have at it, Hoss.
Recent research has shown that empirical evidence for globalization of corporate innovation is very limited. And as a corollary, the market for technologies is shrinking. As a world leader, it's important for America to provide systematic research grants for our scientists. I believe strongly that there will always be a need for us to have a well-articulated innovation policy with emphasis on human resource development. Thank you.
So as with any unit, we're going to start off with our basic vocabulary. Just like in an essay, you have a thesis, introduction, and a conclusion to a debate. The thesis, just like in an essay, is going to be a statement of what a debater is going to be arguing. It's their main point. An introduction is an opening to an argument. A good introduction includes the speaker's thesis and a brief statement on why they're right. A conclusion is a closing to an argument. A good conclusion summarizes the points made in a debate without introducing new points. A rebuttal is one of the most important parts of a debate. It's an opportunity to address the points your opposition made specifically. In a rebuttal, the debater is given the chance to discuss specific points and then argue against them. And then you have an opportunity to refute as well, which is to deny the validity of a certain point or piece of evidence. So if you say something about a statistic, I could bring up the fact that you got the statistic from a newspaper that is a tabloid and not really a newspaper. So it's attacking the credibility or how valid that evidence can be considered. Now, for debating tips, there are many ways to structure a debate. There are also different strategies for participating in debates. Today, we're going to look at some of these strategies. Now, you'll notice that you do not have a part that looks like this on your worksheet, and that's okay. What I want you to do is just pay attention as we go over some of these tips, and then I'll make sure to alert you when we pick up back on something that you have to keep notes on. Make sure you don't let your emotions get the better of you. It's really easy to get upset in a debate, especially if someone is trying to counter what you're saying or take away how much credibility you have. Do stay calm and speak in a clear and rational voice. Remember, debaters do not always choose what side they're on. Sometimes you're going to be assigned a debate, and you're not really going to know what side you're on, so you have to be prepared for anything. I want you guys to look at some other examples of presidential debates and see how your mannerisms and the way you speak can really change and alter the way your debate is perceived.
One indisputable truth, debates, well, they can make history.
I've been there now.
September 26, 1960, the first televised presidential debate, signaling a new era where appearances matter more than ever, and gaffes, however small, are magnified.
Goals are the same for all Americans.
John F. Kennedy, a young senator from Massachusetts, facing off against Vice President Richard Nixon, who's known to be a fierce debater. But on screen, Kennedy looks cool and calm, while Nixon looks uncomfortable, sweating profusely under the hot studio lights.
I think I better shave.
Nixon flounders under the glare of television for all 4 debates. Kennedy goes on to win the election. In 1976, President Gerald Ford makes this blunder in his debate with Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter.
There is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration. I'm sorry, could I just pause?
The remark becomes a central theme in Carter's campaign and is blamed by many for costing Ford the election.
Emphasis.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan is repeatedly attacked by President Carter for his stance on health care.
Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare.
But Reagan wins fans and the election by staying cool.
There you go again.
4 years later, President Reagan again uses humor to handle attacks on his age during his debate with Walter Mondale.
And I want you to know that also, I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
In the next election, Democratic candidate Michael Dukakis is asked this controversial question in his debate with Vice President George Bush.
Governor, if Kitty Dukakis were raped and murdered, would you favor an irrevocable death penalty for the killer?
No, I don't, Bernard, and I think you know that I've opposed the death penalty during all of my life.
The public sees his answer as cold and dispassionate, and that very night his poll numbers drop. During the 1988 vice presidential debate, Republican Senator Dan Quayle's comparison to John F. Kennedy elicits this blistering response from his opponent.
Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Body language plays a part in the presidential debate in 1992. George H.W. Bush deliberately looks at his watch, and he pays for it when the audience and voters see it as disrespectful.
Here's differences.
Body language makes a difference in the debate between Al Gore and George W. Bush as well. Gore sighs over and over again. Bush, the underdog, surprises by winning the debate and, of course, the election. That's what it governor. Both President Obama and Governor Romney are seasoned debaters, and experts say neither are prone to making major gaffes. But if there is one thing that history's taught us when it comes to presidential debates, expect the unexpected.
So as we move forward, it's important to focus on some other tips for giving a debate or being involved in a debate. The first speaker in a debate must make sure that the topic being debated is clearly stated and defined. Don't sidetrack your opponents with irrelevant points. Stay on topic. Also, make sure you don't attack your opponents. You should be discussing the debate topic, not the person and their personal flaws or anything like that. It makes you look bad, it makes you less likely to be favorable from the judges, and it's also kind of mean. Make sure you do stick to your planned, researched arguments, and cue cards or note cards can definitely help a debater to stay focused. But don't read from them. Just glance down at them every once in a while as a guide for main points that you want to make. Make sure you do thoroughly research your topic and position, and the best thing that you can do is to start expecting and countering a rebuttal by researching ahead of time. So if you're arguing on one side of an argument, but you can see some of the logic in the other side, try to anticipate the rebuttals that your opponents are going to have and address them through your research. Make sure you also don't just simply state facts. This is a great way to start being a dull speaker that no one's going to be interested in listening to. Use facts to support your speech, and your speech should be passionate, it should be persuasive, and it should be focused on what you're talking about, not just listing facts. And make sure that you also state your sources or back up your statements. Otherwise, it could lead to a very strong and heavy rebuttal from your opponents. I want to show you an example of rebuttals in real-life political debates in the most recent Obama and Mitt Romney presidential election.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension? Have you looked at your pension?
I've got to say.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension?
You know, I don't look at my pension. It's not as big as yours, so it doesn't take as long.
Let me give you some. Let me give you some
I
advice.
don't check it that often.
Let me give you some advice. Look at your pension. You also have investments in Chinese companies. You also have investments outside the United States.
Governor Romney says he's got a 5-point plan. Governor Romney doesn't have a 5-point plan. He has a 1-point plan. And that plan is to make sure that folks at the top play by a different set of rules.
You'll get your chance in a moment. I'm still speaking.
Well,
And the
Governor,
answer is, I don't believe people
if
think
you're
that's the
asking me a
case
question,
because
I'm not
that wasn't a question.
Okay.
That was a statement. I think I was supposed to get that last answer, but I want to point out that I don't believe.
I don't think so, Ken.
I don't
I
believe.
want to make sure our timekeepers are working
The
here.
time to keep.
timekeepers are all working, and let me tell you that the last part, for the two of you to talk to one another, and it isn't quite as ordered as you think. But go ahead and use this 2 minutes any way you'd like to. The question is on the floor.
Well, I think Governor Romney was for an assault weapons ban before he was against it. And he said that the reason he changed his mind was in part because he was seeking the endorsement of the National Rifle Association. So that's on the record.
You said in the Rose Garden, the day after the attack, it was an act of terror. It was not a spontaneous
proceed.
demonstration. Is that what you're saying?
Please proceed, Governor.
I want to make sure we get that for the record because it took the president 14 days before he called the attack in Benghazi an act of terror.
Get the transcript.
He did, in fact, sir. So let me call it an act of terror.
Can you say that a little louder, Candy?
He did call it an act of terror. It did as well take 2 weeks or so for the whole idea of there being a riot out there about this tape.
Make sure you do, whenever possible, use humor or anecdotes like stories in your speaking. Makes it more interesting for your audience. Make sure you also are using examples that help illustrate your position. Don't just talk about stories that have nothing to do with it. You have to stay focused because you're almost always going to be on a time limit. Make sure you also use, whenever possible, an argument of precedence. And a precedent is when something is established before. Stories or jokes that are appropriate can be very involving to the audience and to the judges as well. Now, time. Time is a very important factor in a debate. Many people disregard the time that they have and they start rambling about stories, or they finish their points well before their allotted time is over and it makes them look underprepared. Do make sure that you're aware of time constraints if there are any. What I would do is practice your initial speech so you're on top of the situation, and during the speech all you're doing is reacting to what they're saying and countering it. Make sure you know what it feels like to speak for the allotted length of time. Speaking too much or not enough weakens your position and your argument. So make sure you practice so in your head as you're speaking you understand and you feel what it's like to speak for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, or whatever the allotted time is. Don't try to juggle too many points at once. State your ideas in a clear and logical order. Make a point, then prove it with evidence. Then make a new point and prove it with new evidence. Don't just list 18 points and then start talking about things that are going to confuse your audience. Another tip, again, the more you practice and plan your speaking, the less nervous you're going to be during the actual presentation or the debate. Don't use inappropriate language or gestures, and people are going to ignore your information if they're not presented in an appropriate manner. Remember, any argument that you do not address in a rebuttal will be left in the memory of others as your opponents stated it. So if you want to address something that your opponents mentioned, make sure you do so. Otherwise, they're going to take it as whatever your opponents say. Likewise, any rebuttal from your opponents that you do not address will be left in the minds of the audience or judges accordingly. If you have a partner, make sure that you're aware of what your partner's plans are. That way you're on the same page, you don't repeat what you're going to be saying, and that you're not working alone to risk the opportunities or chances of being redundant. Make sure you make the most of your team's time. Do recycle information in your closing speech, meaning you're going to summarize it and mention all of your main points that are relevant at the end of your speech. Now here are some important things I want to go over as well. The following are all different strategies that can be applied to many different debate topics. There's the slippery slope strategy, which is a debate strategy that suggests if you allow something to happen, it becomes way too easy to lose control. For example, if we ban Hummers because they're bad for the environment, eventually the government's going to ban all cars, so we should not ban all Hummers. Ad hominem is a debate strategy that distracts the audience from the debate topic itself and instead focuses on taking away the credibility or believability of your opponent. Like, how can you ever consider his plans for election? He isn't even a politician, he's an actor. You also have post hoc ergo propter hoc, either or, and ad populum, which you can see here. Remember that while any of these strategies can be used in a debate, you need to prepare yourself and anticipate what your opponents are going to say. And make sure you follow all proper debate